Hey guys, this is Will Witt with the Florida Standard. Today I interviewed Dr. Richard Amerling, who was a founding member of the Wellness Company and was let go from his job at SGU after he didn't comply with their vaccine mandate. Today we talked about Big Pharma corruption and where medicine in America has gone wrong. Check it out right here. So, what do you think has transpired to make the field of medicine, a field that is supposed to be all about helping people, making people better, making them healthy, how has it become so corrupt in America today?
It's been a long process. It's been going on for decades, in fact. It started many years ago with the takeover of medicine by third-party payers. And that was accelerated greatly by Medicare and Medicaid in the 60s. So that's how far back it goes. Over time, the Medicare program, which has always had a dominant role in payment for medical services, became more and more demanding on how doctors get paid through it. And ultimately, to participate in Medicare, doctors had to agree to accept that payment as their full payment, minus 20%, but very few people actually collected that. So they determined the rates, and the third-party insurers, the private insurers, generally paid more, but they followed the Medicare guidelines in many ways. And once you lose your independent patient base and you no longer have patients paying you directly for your services, that tends to be corrupting right there, because those third parties can exert influence on how you practice medicine. And that ultimately is what happened. Another big problem was the adoption, a widespread adoption in the medical community of something called evidence-based medicine. And while that sounds scientific, when you actually look at the details, it is pseudoscientific. What it does is it creates an arbitrary hierarchy of evidence with certain types of studies at the top, meaning the randomized controlled trials, and later on they added meta-analyses. And both of these, sadly, are easy to manipulate. And the pharmaceutical industry is expert at designing and manipulating randomized controlled trials, for example, to sell any product that they want. And that set the stage for the pharma takeover of medicine. Doctors adopted this evidence-based medicine model, and that led to the creation of guideline panels that would come out with practice guidelines. And this is something that is recent in medicine. And that's what really got me to notice the whole evidence-based medicine cult. I started to see guidelines appear in medicine where they had not been before. Doctors were always free to exercise their best judgment based on their scientific training, their reading of the medical literature, and their personal experience treating sick patients and using different remedies. So that all of that stuff was pushed down to the lower levels of the so-called hierarchy of evidence. And these panels assumed dictatorial powers. And they told doctors that this is the best practice, this is what you must do. The problem was that so many of these panelists who wrote these guidelines were being paid by industry.
Well, how do you have the doctors who will take these sorts of luncheons and these private trips to a big pharma conference and these kind of things and feel good about themselves for what they're doing when they know that they are selling out essentially their souls to big pharma and then prescribing people all sorts of different drugs for whatever it might be, that you don't need a drug. There are different lifestyle choices you can make. How do these people get away with this? I mean, how has the medical community been able to pull the wool over so many people's eyes and not have people wake up to the fact that these doctors, many of these hospitals, they're just controlled by these massive corporations? And how do we break that control that we see?
Well, to give you the full confession, I was part of that years ago. In fact, I was a key opinion leader, as they call them, the KOL, for certain products in the kidney arena, the nephrology arena. And I used to go to these meetings, and they would pay us a lot of money. They would, fly you back and forth, put you up in a fancy hotel, and you get a few $1,000s for work as a consultant. That's how it worked. But the products that they were promoting, I thought were good products at that time, and I felt like I was doing good work by learning about these products and promoting them in talks that I would give around the country to other doctors and at major meetings. So that's how they do it. And I soured on it when I realized that the products had side effects that they weren't being upfront about, and that they were in fact downplaying. And I don't want to bore your listeners with examples, but there are quite a few. And I bowed out and I started to actually write articles that were pointing out these issues. And suddenly I was on the blacklist. And I never really got invited to speak at major meetings after that.
I think that's
But
quite admirable of you to be someone who was involved in this entire space, involved in that sphere, and then kind of see the light, I guess you could say, and come out against it after that. Why do you think that there aren't more doctors who are doing similar things to you, or just more people who are in that field?
it became so widespread and at the highest levels. I mean, universities taking huge amounts of money from industry, editors of prestigious journals taking huge amounts of money from industry, that everybody said, well, why shouldn't I do it? Everybody else is doing it. It seems to be okay. No one is burning in hell yet, right? That I can see. So why not me? So that's how it all goes. And let me give a shout out to one of my nephrology colleagues up in Canada, Dr. Jason Fung. He's been very good at pointing fingers and naming names at some of these people who are taking lots of money, and they're spouting out, treatment practice guidelines when they're taking money from the industry that's making the products that they're promoting. It's a huge financial conflict of interest, and it should not be allowed to exist in medicine.
And so, with all this corruption, I mean, how do you fix a problem like this? It seems to be quite vexing. Is this more of a grassroots solution where you have doctors who are smart and wise and see the different lifestyle choices people can make, and they're getting out there and having their voices heard, and that's kind of the solution to influence people? Or is it a legislative issue where government has to step in to put some sort of regulation on these people, or lawsuits with holding these people accountable? What do you think is the solution here for Big Pharma and their corruption?
Well, I think lawsuits, they've been sued mightily, and they've paid huge amounts of fines over the years. They're, in fact, in many ways, criminal organizations, and they make so much money that they can afford to pay these as cost of doing business. They also control governments. So they control representatives. They buy them. They lobby. They buy. So I don't think that's going to ever be the answer. The answer is going to be more and more doctors reclaiming their independence and going out on their own and practicing real medicine again, and ignoring these pharma-produced practice guidelines, and practicing ethical medicine. And of course, that's another aspect of the decline of medicine, which has been the loss of medical ethics.
And what is different about the wellness company that makes the wellness company different than all these other things that you're seeing, these other organizations?
So the wellness company, we have a group of physicians that are doing telemedicine currently, and we are actively training them. And we are training them to be ethical, science-based clinicians, which is the way doctors used to be before pharma destroyed the profession, frankly. And what does that mean? Well, we re-emphasize medical ethics. Medical ethics has been largely abandoned. The Hippocratic Oath is largely gone. I mean, many medical schools either don't have their students recite it, or they recite a bastardized version of it that takes out a lot of the key elements of it. But it's a crucial statement of medical ethics, which is the underpinning of the profession. If you don't have ethics, you don't really have a profession. What sets medicine aside is this pledge to represent their patients and to work for them and to help them to get healthy and to further their interests. And without that, you don't really have anything. You just have a bunch of technocrats who are treating numbers. And that, sadly, is what a lot of modern medicine has become. So at the Wellness Company, we're reinventing medicine, starting with a strong base of medical ethics. We're not harming patients. We're giving them full informed consent. We're weighing risk versus benefit for everything that we do. And we're honest with them. We're not trying to push them in one direction or another. We want to enlist their support in regaining good health and maintaining it.
What would you tell someone who might be watching this as the number one thing that they should do to advance their own health, or to look away from modern medicine as it might be and do something for themselves that will actually benefit them in the long term?
Well, aside from coming to the Wellness Company, that would be a first step. But what we emphasize is to have a proper, healthy diet above all else. And with that, you will be able to start to reverse many of the chronic diseases that plague Americans, such as diabetes, such as hypertension, such as osteoarthritis, such as massive obesity, to name a few, polycystic ovaries. There are so many of these diseases that are directly related to our very unhealthy eating habits. And those eating habits were a result of official government policy back in the late 70s, pushing people to abandon traditional healthy fats such as butter and lard, and to consume these industrially produced vegetable seed oils that turn out to be very toxic. And then also to eat way more grains than we're really supposed to in terms of our biology. And then to accept the addition of sugar to almost every food that you buy in the supermarket. If you look at the label, they add sugar or corn syrup to almost everything, including things like ketchup, for Christ's sake. It's just amazing.
Well, so many
So
of these things are inflammation. These
yes,
disease and things. It's an inflammation excess problem that we have in this country right now, caused by all of these different food products.
Yeah. Well, the vegetable oils,
food.
yeah, the vegetable oils, which are high in omega-6 fatty acids, are pro-inflammatory. They're precursors for inflammatory mediators. And they also promote obesity. And obesity began to skyrocket in the United States around 1980, which is when these guidelines took effect. And I remember, because I grew up in the 60s and I saw people were slim. It was clear. And you can go back and watch the movie Woodstock, and you see 500,000 skinny people out there in the crowd, cheering on Joe Cocker. And by the way, I was there, so that dates me. But there was no obesity problem in America until they started to change the food environment and promote these unhealthy fake fats.
Yeah, I had gout myself. This was a few years ago, and I had a rather unhealthy diet. I was eating basically everything that you just described, and I was told, red meat is the enemy. Don't eat red meat because that's what's causing your inflammation in your feet and all that. And I tried that for a little bit, still had the gout. Eventually figured out that I can cut out all these different seed oils and all these other things, and my gout's gone. It's been gone for years. Haven't had a flare up in years now because of it. And that's what's so scary, is that the prevailing medical advice that you're getting from the mainstream is so inadequate and in many ways just actually lies, that is making people unhealthier than really ever before, unprecedented in human history.
Very true. And gout, which is due to elevation of uric acid, is directly related to consumption of fructose. Okay, so fructose is in sugar. Fructose is about 50% of table sugar is fructose. And we're consuming tons of this stuff every year. And that biochemically leads to increase in uric acid production and gout. So the major cause of gout is, in fact, sugar consumption, and easy to fix.
Yeah, no more Twizzlers and Sour Patch Kids for me. Just raw milk and red meat nowadays. I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing this interview with us. We really appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out the Wellness Company for everything that you need to know about health and medicine. And we're going to see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.